Вона повернеться ще. Це добре, що ми на завтра не домовилися, бо завтра комітет.
Завтра ми не зможемо.
Так. Так.
Good morning, colleagues. It's a day of anti-monopoly legislation in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center and Center of Reforms. And now we have a briefing on legislation and development on protection of economic competition and positions of MPs in the ministries and anti-monopoly committee on that. And at 1:30 there will be the head of anti-monopoly committee, Mr. Terentiev, on its work. He will inform you. The issue of the protection of economic competition becomes very important on the agenda of reforms, not only internal but also in the parliament. There is a number of initiatives. We will discuss them and discuss their importance, and for us, not without further ado. We'll start with Victoria Ptashnyk, who's all the bills and on anti-monopoly regulation reform. She is the deputy. Thank you, dear colleagues. My name is Victoria Ptashnyk. I'm a member of the Committee on Economic Policy, and this is deals with anti-monopoly legislation. Representatives of a group of Samopolinichi in the parliament. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm extremely happy that such terminology like Day of Anti-Monopoly Committee became possible, because when last year we participated in coalition discussions, and when we were elected MPs to the parliament, the issue of anti-monopoly legislation was not mentioned at all. Not during the coalition, not among deputies, and not among representatives of different ministries, and that's why I'm very thankful to all colleagues and representatives of state public service and of the public that these issues are discussed, and the importance is growing. You know, why is it important? Because the work of anti-monopoly committee and its activity, transparent or not, competitive or not, honest or not, is it directed to develop competition and to protect it, or to monopolists, and all of that has influence on quality of the goods we buy, and how normal, adequate prices, market prices we have. Will we have a choice as consumers or not? All these issues are extremely important, and this is just wonderful that all of us are together here, including representatives of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, and I hope that when we have this triangle between MPs, Cabinet of Ministers, and Anti-Monopoly Committee, the reform on the field of anti-monopoly legislation will become possible. I would like to mention several initiatives of mine registered in the Parliament, and some of them were in the first reading already. Some of them are on the way. But they are all about reforms of anti-monopoly legislation. First of all, this is our legislation 2102, which speaks about publication of all the decisions of anti-monopoly committee, and all the decisions about different sanctions, and bring to responsibility those who abuse legislation on protection of economic competition, and also decisions related to permission procedures of anti-monopoly committee, and providing permissions for consideration for agreed actions. So why is it important? You know, At present, Anti-Monopoly Committee publishes, first of all, not all decisions, and from 1-2 sentences from decisions as accepts, and it's never clear which company is buying which company. Why the committee gave such a decision, made a decision for such, agreed to such a purchase. During last weekend, there were a lot of information about smuggling of cigarettes and events in the West, unfortunately. Once, if Anti-Monopoly Committee published decisions on enlargement, on merger on the market of wholesale trade with cigarettes and how company Megapolis, which is a Russian company, 100% they bought all distributors of cigarettes, and from which those Russian occupants are financed. In the East, they are financed from that budget. If Anti-Monopoly Committee published that information and how they gave if they publish information about such a concentration, about such a merger, we would have a lot of questions to them. 2102 draft law, which was approved in the first reading, which was prepared by the Committee on Economic Policy for the second reading, we will open for all the community, for all business. We will open the door to Anti-Monopoly Committee, and on our website, the committee will publish all decisions. And then the policy of the committee will be more balanced, and business and the community will be more one nature now. Next initiative is 2431, the draft law, which we would like, with which we would like to calculate the procedure of fine sanctions, because the legislation we have it provides only maximum for of fine for abuses in the field of legislation on protection of economic competition. You know, when we have that top line, the ceiling, it suits like subjects of economy against which we have a case in the committee. They come to the committee for the hearing, and they see the situation that, for example, with the previous leadership of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, when the previous leadership, they were blackmailing. And when they offered to, let's do something for us, bring us something else, bring us something in information, and then if you don't do that, we will fine you maximally like 10% from an annual trade over the company. And that practice is unacceptable. It's corruption, pure corruption, and I hope that the new leadership will break this vicious circle, closed circle. And our draft law, I hope, will be that base for Anti-Monopoly Committee finally to introduce and calculate methods of calculation of fines, and for companies to know, for business to know, if they recognize, confess that they commit abuses, and a different formula could be applied to them. If they helped investigation, that can change their penalties. But the committee will be predictable also. The third initiative is about permits of Anti-Monopoly Committee for consideration, and for when one business purchases other when there's restructuring, when there are reappointments in those companies, vertically integrated companies, etc. And at present, when in such business, when one company would like to buy a different company, quite often we have to use monopoly committees to get a permission. Why? Because there are some indexes, and when you get you have achieved those indexes before acquisition, you need to have a permission from the anti-monopoly committee. Those indexes are very low in Ukraine. In 2008, when internal organization OECD, when they held a revision of our anti-monopoly legislation, even at that time they advised us that those indexes of price indexes, they should be reviewed and enlarged. And in 2015, but the indexes are the same. So what does it bring us to? When we have a merger, when a Swiss company, for example, buys a company in France, when when there is a permission, and by the competition agencies, those companies sit in a wait and way, and a monopoly committee will give a permission for that foreign acquisition, which cannot influence on the competition, or can have a very not a big influence on competition on the market in Ukraine. That's why with our draft law, we would like to review that and where they need to come to anti-monopoly commission. Now, if they don't have influence on competition on Ukraine, they should not require application to anti-monopoly committee. And also, there should be a short list of documents to provide to anti-monopoly committee for those in foreign concentrations, not to require 45 days term of waiting in from the decision from anti-monopoly committee. We should reduce that procedure, that period, and we should direct quicker. I will give the floor to my colleagues. I would like to say that I'm awfully thankful that the Minister of Economy and the Monopoly Committee, they here finally heard our voice of MPs, and you'll be a leader in anti-monopoly reform because only if we have such a triangle we can achieve something.
Thank you, Victoria. I would like to stress also that last week the Minister of Economy has rather clearly said that they do support these draft laws as part of the reform, as part of the strengthening of competition and competitiveness in Ukrainian economy. I'd like Pani Kovaliv, Ms. Kovaliv, who is First Deputy Minister, to explain the policy of the ministry in this respect. Hello, I'm glad to welcome everyone. I do support Victoria absolutely, and we are very glad that today we see the new team of the Anti-Monopoly Committee and MPs who were initiators of putting this clause into the coalition agreement. As you know, last week on Friday, our team of the Ministry of Economy has suggested the basic principles of the formation of economy, and one of those principles is provision for the free competition in the broadest branches of economy. Demonopolization and deregulation in economy is very important as we see it for the good development of business. Today we have a lot of sectors of economy that are monopolized, or there's oligopoly in it. What is bad here for the business? At the market where there's one huge player, they dictate to the consumer and suppliers certain strict rules of the game, so the end consumers and any business that is controlled by the monopolist, they do not have a real opportunity to protect their real interests, and as a result we see certain deviations on the market. I'd like to clarify certain steps how we see the reform of anti-monopoly legislation. First of all, these are the measures that Victoria mentioned and the provision for the openness, and we as the Ministry of Economy have to provide for the maximum openness for the business of all the decisions that we take, both in the text of the decisions and the motives why we arrive at them. So this is very important because there are several blocks of decisions. There are, for instance, decisions about agreed actions or the abuse of monopoly situation. They have to be open for all the players because they affect a lot of counterparts and stakeholders. When we talked to different businesses, they said that while we have a huge authority as far as fines are concerned, up to 10% of the income, the non-transparency in defining these 10% or 1 or 3%, this created for businesses, a rather unexplained position. Also, from the point of view of anti-monopoly committee, a certain opportunity to use the sanctions, which were rather significant for businesses. So we are now working on the order of the use of such sanctions, including the possibility of lessening the amount of fines when, for instance, they have done this for the first time and then they undertake obligation to observe anti-monopoly legislation in the future. We also talked about thresholds when agreeing the actions on concentration. As of today, taking into account our markets, the thresholds that were there before are very, very low, especially when we are talking about merger of companies that do not directly work on the Ukrainian market, or maybe where the Ukrainian affiliate or daughter company has a small proportion of the market, could delay international agreements and contracts. In this respect, we could, of course, raise the levels of material essence, and these are our first steps that we could implement very soon. In the future, we will have to look at two great blocks. First of all, put into order the functions and authority of the body. 42% of violations of legislation is the abuse of monopoly situation by those companies that are already recognized as monopolies. And in most cases, those are natural monopolies where the functions of the anti-monopoly committee are replicated by regulators. And we have to delineate our functions so that we do not look into similar complaints. And together with regulators, to put to order the access to the infrastructure and to minimize the abuse of done by natural monopolies. Another 12% of such violations were bad competition, and also violations and abuse in advertisement. And here we see the replication of functions with the bodies to protect consumers' interests. We have to detach this as well, because the more regulators and controllers we have, the more complicated life of our businesses. We have to gather the entire list of monopolies in one place. At the moment, we don't have this, so we suggest that there should be a list of monopolies and it should be concentrated in one place, which should be accessible to all and everyone. And the third block, which is no less important, I think, is rather strategic. It's about the assessment of the state monitoring of the system. In 2014, we had a law passed on the state help to economic subjects, where Anti-Monopoly Committee was the authorized body. And at the moment, there's a lot of state help to branches or different subjects in our legislation, and this could be relief of customs and direct dotations, subsidies to different economic objects. And as a result, we create in many branches non-equal conditions for competition. And the role of Anti-Monopoly Committee here is to audit all the state help that is there at the moment, and then to audit all the potential objects of state help that is being planned as far as their influence on the competitive market is concerned. This law does take effect in 2017, but we would recommend the bodies to start even today, to create methods how we will calculate this, to audit the current state of state help. Maybe we will see that there are some kinds of state help that are no longer efficient, and they should be cancelled even before this law is enacted. So we do suggest that Anti-Monopoly Committee works with us on this issue, as we are concerned about economic development and economic competition, and we should start pilot projects even now.
It's important that we have at least two people, the representatives of public authorities and the government, speak primarily about control over state assistance, and that's an issue during negotiations with the EU. Was very important. It was discussed on the level of professionals, but on the top level it was not accepted. But it's important not to have just external control from Anti-Monopoly Committee, but the government should have internal audit and about dotation elements. So cooperation between Ministry of Economy and Anti-Monopoly Committee is not only the issue for the development of legislation, but the issue of optimization of the work of the government. When speaking about Anti-Monopoly Committee, I would invite Mrs. Nizhnik to speak, to tell about the position of your position. There will be a briefing of the head of Anti-Monopoly Committee, and broadly we could come at the work of. Good morning. Thank you for your invitation. Victoria told that we will open the door of Anti-Monopoly Committee. Honestly, it seems to me that the door is opened. It's open, honestly speaking. We have a new Anti-Monopoly Committee, new staff, and I'm sure that Anti-Monopoly Committee understands the necessity of transparency, predictability in its work, non-discrimination of business, and full openness. So once again, I repeat, our door is open. We are ready to cooperate, and honestly, we cooperate already with MPs and with the Ministry of Economy on these three legislations. And Anti-Monopoly Committee, we support all these three legislations about fines and indexes and publications or decisions. There are some comments and recommendations about it's easy to solve them. In addition to that, as far as you know, last Friday there was a meeting of authorized people from anti-monopoly committee. At this meeting, they passed several important issues on the most important issues in the work of anti-monopoly committee, and at that meeting they decided that the main key aspect of activity and necessity to pass to approve anti-monopoly reform is not to wait for legislations discussed in the parliament. They approved a decision to make amendments to regulation on concentration, and which provides the order of supplying documents and consideration of issues on concentration and issuing a permission. If concentration can have a negative effect on competition in Ukraine, and the Monopoly Committee has discretion. At our discretion, we can consider these cases half a year or 2 years and more, and public people, authorized people, they were supposed to bring changes on concentration, and anti-monopoly committee is a little restricted by half a year in order to give permission for consideration, even in big decisions. This half a year could be prolonged only at the decision of applicants. If applicants need more time to prepare documents, to study the market, to get any expertise, then they can request anti-monopoly committee to prolong the term. All other cases, and anti-monopoly committee has to resolve the issue in 180 days, and changes amendments will be on our website, and they will be open for public and in order to discuss them. That's why any propositions, proposals, we are waiting for that from business and from NGOs. Anti-monopoly committee, we decided on Friday to publish decisions starting from the next meeting. So there is from this Wednesday, all decisions of the committee will be public on open source. I don't know how all information, to which extent all information will be provided, because there is such an issue as confidentiality. But this is a beginning before they pass laws. And anyways, there will be more information than just company A received a permission to buy company B. That's also an obligation from EU, and we started to work on it, to comply with that requirement. It is, we plan in the coming 3 weeks to publish the draft of recommendations about principles of fining or penalties, and it's very important. The business should be predictable, and business should understand what kind of penalties will be used against them, against the abuse. And that was accepted, and those principles will be published very soon, and we are ready for discussion. I know that there are some other draft laws, and we are ready to discuss them in order to develop, to find the best acceptable position for business and for the society. Plus, one of the steps expected from anti-monopoly committee is to review the regulation of concentration. If you know about applications about concentration, you understand that this is about big volume of documents, information which unfortunately in many cases they have nothing to do with analysis and influence of that on the market of Ukraine. That's why the committee took obligation. So in the coming 2-3 months, we will publish a new order, new procedures, and we'll analyze the necessity to supply all documents for concentration. So it will simplify, it will ease the way requesting and answers of Anti-Monopoly Committee. Also, thank you. I would like to thank Ministry of Economy for the proposal to separate functions, because it's a problem when the same functions are done by the same, when there's overlap of functions, and that helps to dishonest competition, and that's as to state assistance. That's an issue because in Anti-Monopoly Committee we have a working group which now reviews the legislation, and also we have a pilot. First steps to monitor and control. We rely on cooperation with Ministry of Economy. Thank you, Mariya. We have, it's wonderful. There is understanding and cooperation. We have two more panelists who are the most important, because we listen to representatives of the government. We have representatives of business and NGOs. These are very specific representatives because of their input into the development of this. Legislation is not smaller, less than the input of the government. I invite Lana Sinichkina, on Arzinger, co-author of the bill, and she was working on the methodology of penalties, and they issued proposals and vision of experts on from legal business, and that's why position now of legal. We have these brochures. So here's the position of business, of legal business, and what you wish from this.
Very much. I'll talk not only on behalf of the experts and not only as a person who drafted one of the initiatives, but I'd also talk as a person who represents a business. I had the Committee on Food Industry in the American Chamber of Commerce, and I've been hearing a lot of claims about the bad state of anti-monopoly regulation in Ukraine, and for quite some time only business was speaking about the necessity of reform, and the bodies of power were not interested in this reform taking place. And the independent status of the Anti-Monopoly Committee and the order of appointment and subjection of this order has created an atmosphere of discretion in this body, and they had very powerful authority, and there was very few opportunities to appeal against their decisions. This led to the fact that the activity of Anti-Monopoly Commission was unforeseeable and very discretionary. Besides, they did not publish their decisions, which led, of course, to impossibility to monitor the practice of the Anti-Monopoly Committee and to raise the question of abuses of power and some discriminatory decisions. But today, when we got the new composition of Anti-Monopoly Commission, when we see a proactive approach on the part of newly imported representatives, we see proactive approach on the part of the Ministry of Economy, and we also have a hope that there may be movement in the correct direction. Because of this concerned position of, first of all, the MPs, and Viktoria Ptashnyk is one of the initiators, today we have 3 draft laws registered, and I'll enumerate them now so that you better remember. 2431 about fines, 2168 on concentration, and 2102 about the publication of decisions. Unfortunately, what we see today is that not every MP, or even not the majority, and many MPs and many representatives of executive power do not understand the importance of this reform. They do not understand that this is a component of the economic reform. This does influence the investment attractiveness of Ukraine and the prices, whether they are justified or not. And this is what should be in the main focus of economic reforms in Ukraine. Regrettably, the role of anti-monopoly committee and the role of anti-monopoly regulation in the country is underassessed. And some of those who do understand, they try to subvert the reform. And of course, first of all, they try to delay the reform. We do welcome the proactive position of anti-monopoly committee, because at their level, they started to adopt more transparent rules of activity, but at the same time, as a business, we would like to see this regulated by the law, so that we have fully fledged and understandable norms that could be used to appeal against the unfounded decisions of anti-monopoly committee. That's why it is very important for us to switch from words to deeds, to adopt these laws. At the moment, they are not a priority for some reason, and we want to concentrate our attention on this, and we do hope that very soon, probably even this week, the Parliament will consider the anti-monopoly initiatives. Another very important moment is how this reform can be delayed and disrupted. For instance, draft law 2431 on the methodology of fines, of calculation of fines. We see ideas and initiatives from different angles, that this should be my methodology, that there should be some principles that does not create a clear-cut methodology. They provide for some assessments, and this can be very difficult to appeal against. Another idea that we know, and we are apprehensive about this, is that the anti-monopoly committee, that the court should not get the rights to review the amount of fines issued by the anti-monopoly committee, that they should send the decisions back to the anti-monopoly committee, so the business won't have an opportunity to review the level of fines in an independent court body. Artificially, they will be made to solve the issues, in inverted commas, in an anti-monopoly committee. We want to get rid of these corruption-generating factors. That's why we insist on, as fast as possible, realization of anti-monopoly reform by adopting those three draft laws that I told you about, and we will be grateful for the support. And everybody should understand that these numbers are not some enigmatic code. This is a plenary week at the Parliament, and everybody talks in figures, and the numbers talk, and I give the floor to representatives of the advocacy group Stronger Together, who are concerned with the agreement of Ukrainian and European legislation. The Committee on the Association Ukraine-EU has started its work in Brussels today, and they are talking about monitoring the Ukrainian fulfillment of these laws. So, Mariya?
Just for public society to have something to report. Euro integration initiative stronger together, and one of the components is the cooperation with the Parliament and government and all embassies of EU countries for us to implement association agreement quicker. Especially the part which is about free trade zone, free trade area. In January, we developed a map of European integration reforms. These are top draft laws the Parliament must approve by the end of 2015 to fill your integration with content and to prepare for implementation of free trade area. One of the blocks of this map of reforms is a part on reformation of anti-monopoly legislation, and we cooperated with Mrs. Sinichkina, with Ptashnyk, and with MPs to prepare these draft laws. All draft laws Victoria and Yulia and Mariya mentioned, they belong to this map of European integration reforms, and in terms of on transparent rules of penalties and about transparency and necessity to publish the decisions of anti-monopoly committee, and providing permission for concentration. So we underline that all these draft laws are a part of Euro integration. This should be a priority for MPs in the Parliament, and they should be considered almost according to quick procedure. So when for 2-3 weeks MPs just don't have enough of time, for example, to consider 2431 draft laws, that is unacceptable. I will speak in details about legislation 2431 about transparency rules of penalty and to penalty, and there's a plan of legislative support of reforms approved by the Parliament of Ukraine, and also the coalition agreement. Added value. Why we raise this issue and of this legislation? As you know, on May 22, and we signed a Rome memorandum about that Ukraine will get American officials to support 1.8 billion euro. That memorandum is based on so-called conditionality. So Ukraine meets the conditions and receives the second tranche. So the condition is now to have a clear understanding, a clear document which should be developed by the National Anti-Monopoly Agency, which explains why such a size of penalty is used, why such penalty is calculated, what is behind calculations. That's a requirement of our international partners, and it can serve as a good index that Ukraine not only complies with international commitments but also cares about interest and national interest, because there is a requirement of business, and Lana told you about that. When we meet business, a priority, and how we can help as an initiative that is anti-monopoly reform. Then, I would like to mention why this draft law works for integration. This is a direct commitment from association agreement. We have 255 article 10, article 255, which provides necessity of such a document, which we together like a business, we like to see it as a part of clear methodology, and also a chance to review decisions of anti-monopoly committee in court. So we would like to demonstrate with the development for graphics how, for example, such fines are calculated and applied, how they applied in a year. They have some guidelines and developed by Euro Commission, and it says clearly what is a basic sum, what is variation, what are the conditions, good or bad conditions. So all players of the market they will understand clear about consequences for violation, for abuse, and anti-monopoly regulators. And they are abroad. They are objective and biased regulator. They which works for the benefit of business. On the other hand, it's a watchdog of economic competition. So that's why we welcome such a great position of representatives from the Parliament and the Monopoly Community, Ministry of Economy, for cooperation. And it's great that Anti-Monopoly Committee takes the first steps, at least, to bring to public discussion such a document and methods of development of fines and penalties. We as NGO and the representatives of business will participate in this working group, and we'll have a good quality document, and it will be reform, and there will be a demobilization, deorganization. It has deregulatory nature, and also it will improve investment attractiveness of our country in general. I have some numbers. You know that in the rating of doing business, Ukraine is on the 89th place, and no, 96. As to index of investment in attractiveness, we hold on 89th place. We are much in advance compared to 2013, but our public servants travel around the world and convince investors to go to Ukraine despite the war. A lot of work is to do our homework. It's not enough to invite investors to Ukraine and to invest money. They will invest money where they feel comfortable. So we must create comfortable conditions for investors to come to Ukraine. And then it becomes done when MPs work together and when the government and public work together. So the draft law 2431 can be an indicator of the first step which will indicate our readiness to change and to create attractive conditions for investors. So we're ready to cooperate. We're looking forward to this week. In the first reading, they will vote for all these useful anti-monopoly initiatives, and we are looking forward for proposals from Anti-Monopoly Committee to develop methods. And thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Ukrainian Center for Media Reforms, you know, I was involved in working on this, but I want to stress that this is a very good example of the success of the realization of the initiative when both the bodies of the state power and the MPs and the business and the public and international community are all for this, because there used to be and there are examples of the fact that the broader coalition is, and we see that there is a agreement of all the subjects involved. This can be a very good example of realizing this pinpointed and very important issue. Before the questions, I'd like to tell that when we were preparing the reform connected to the transparency of issuing fines, we have not only prepared the draft law, we also prepared the methodology, and this is a booklet on it. It was reviewed by key experts of the European Union on anti-monopoly law, and also by Ukrainian and experts. I'd like to give it to Mariya Nizhnik today, because this could be a good foundation for working out the official document in this sphere, and we as experts and representatives of the business will be ready to discuss anything that you have in this relation. Of course, but the foundation is already there in the anti-monopoly committee, but I think that our task is to produce a very, very adoptable document and to take into account suggestions from all the stakeholders. Thank you. And the question from the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. You told us about the 3 draft laws registered in the Parliament, one on fines, another on concentration, and another on publication of decisions. Could you please go into details about concentration draft law? Okay, I'll tell you. As a representative of MPs and the initiator of this draft law, we have the law on the protection of economic competition when the business is being acquired by someone, or where the control is changed, or some holding wants to become bigger and take over a company. I think that we can remember the loudest story about this, the purchase of Amstel by General Electric. There's a global merger, and the Ukrainian Anti-Monopoly Committee interfered in this story. Yes, there are global mergers. There are mergers on Ukrainian markets when, in fact, one Ukrainian oligarch tries to augment their energy market, and there are demands of the legislation when we look at the cost indicators of the company, annual ones, the value of assets and the volume of commodities and services. It is enough to have 1 million euro of assets or annual turnover, or 12 million for the entire holding, both of the purchaser and seller, to go to the Anti-Monopoly Committee and to get the decision and permit for concentration. We suggest that these indicators should be raised because many European competition departments and representatives of FTC and international organizations and our lawyers specializing in this sphere tell us that at such low indicators the committee is involved in a regulatory procedure, but they do not in any way influence the competition of the market, because there is a normal procedure and it is very hard to get the permit for concentration because you have to submit a lot of information, and the procedure proper lasts for 45 days, whether the permit should be given or not. And besides, there's a special procedure when enterprises address the Anti-Monopoly Committee, and for 15 days the committee thinks whether they accept the package of documents or they send it back saying that probably your package of documents does not correspond to the legislation. So there's a huge manipulation, because when, for instance, the package of documents enters from the street, then the Anti-Monopoly Committee are looking for some things, and officials from there told me that first of all they had an instruction to delay the review as long as possible, and to find as many drawbacks as possible to get the package documents back to the enterprise or company. You understand why this is done. So we do suggest that these indicators should be raised, and there should be a process of consultation when the documents are not sent back and forth, when people can come to the to have consultation at the Anti-Monopoly Committee, when they will be told that we do have such and such remarks and about your committee. If you give us the improved version within so many days, then we would not send the document back. And the third important moment, is that we suggest that this 45-day long procedure of reviewing the documents is decreased to 25 calendar days. And when we understand that as a result of concentration, there won't be a sufficient influence, essential influence on the Ukrainian market, and of course this should be decided by the Anti-Monopoly Committee. We hope that they will be preserved until the third hearing, because this is a prevention mechanism, because when such an important acquisition is happening on the level of Europe and the companies there are waiting for 45 days for this decision of our Anti-Monopoly Committee, this should not be happening. And when there's no influence on Ukraine, or it is not significant, or there's a very little part concentrated on the market, then we can, of course, discuss these documents within a shortened procedure. At 12:30 we have our next briefing. All these things will depend on the administrative practice within the Anti-Monopoly Committee, on specific actions, and in an hour the head of Anti-Monopoly Committee will be able to again introduce this approach. But we have another comment on concentration. The logics of concentration is to decrease the terms, and we ask the Anti-Monopoly Committee to review the list of documents and necessary information. At the moment, business is talking about 1,000 pages of information that they should submit to Anti-Monopoly Committee to get a permit for merger, for concentration. Let's decrease it. Yes, I did tell you that last Friday we did adopt the decision to decrease the number of pages, and we'll talk about this in an hour with the head of Anti-Monopoly Committee. Thank you very much. Today we have the day of competition politics in the Crisis Media Center. We see a rather clear-cut position, and we hope that during this plenary week there will be movement on the adoption of this